Welcome back to the Jake Bequette Show podcast. Back in the house for another great episode this week. Just to recap, last night did a really exciting space on Twitter. It was my first time ever participating in a Twitter space. It was really outstanding. It was put together by my good friend, the Bowtied Ranger. Also co-hosting was Sovereign Bra Chase. If you watch the Whatever podcast or you're familiar with some of his content, he's fantastic. The topics were wide-ranging. Mostly dealing with, what's happening in our world and our country from a Christian worldview, particularly the worldview of a young male Christian. Michael Foster from the East River Church in Ohio joined us. He's the author of It's Good to Be a Man. We had some fantastic conversations, some great questions from some Twitter subscribers, and it was really interesting, so go check that out. That was from last night, or I guess it was Tuesday night, the 13th. A few days before this is airing. But the subject matter that I want to get into this week on the podcast is something that I hope you'll find interesting. It's something I've been following for a couple of years now, and it's been in the news in the world of sports and business. And this is the big merger between LIV Golf and the PGA Tour. So I want to get into what this means. Obviously, I come from a sports background. I was a former NFL football player. Slightly different business situation, between the NFL and the PGA Tour and LIV. The NFL, labor in the NFL is represented by the NFL Players Association, the Players Union. The NFL is owned by the 32 individual owners and their families. They're represented by the commissioner, Roger Goodell. It's a slightly different structure in golf. Obviously, there's no owners in professional golf. The players are the owners themselves. The tour is structured, or was structured, as a 501c6 nonprofit, which is kind of a strange entity, especially considering they were trying to ban some of their members from competing in a different marketplace. But anyway, I want to go back a bit to the beginnings. Kind of the history of professional golf, how we got here, what this new merger investment means. Obviously, a lot of details are still to be determined, but I find this very fascinating. Someone who was who tried to get involved at least a little bit on the business side of the National Football League. I was always fascinated by our collective bargaining process. I did my best with the dumpster fire that is the NFL Players Association. That's a subject for a different podcast. But anyway, I love golf. Golf has always been a big part of my life. My grandpa and dad play golf. I grew up playing golf with my brothers. I still play golf to this day. It's one of my favorite sports to play. I don't really watch golf that much. I watch the majors. Again, we'll kind of get into why that is. But I find this process very interesting from a sports and a business perspective, and I hope you will too. I'm sure there are some golf fans out there in the listener base, listeners to the Jake Bequette Show podcast. So anyway, to wind back the clock, so professional golf, right? So professional golf has always been a story of tension, of a struggle between the top players, the ones who generate all the TV eyeballs, who generate all the ticket revenue, who generate all the endorsement revenue, all the sponsorship revenue, between those guys and then kind of the average, everyday tour pros, the mules, whatever you want to call them. These two groups have always been somewhat in tension because over time, one thing has been consistent, whichever format professional golf takes, the top tour players always feel like they are getting taken advantage of, by some of these no-name players who, let's face it, if they walked into your living room this evening, you probably wouldn't recognize them or know who they were, unless they were inside the ropes at a PGA Tour event. And that, I'm the same way. I follow golf very closely. I love golf, as I said, and really I could only pick out of a lineup maybe 25 or 30 of the top tour pros. The rest are just completely anonymous, but they're making millions of dollars a year, which kind of begs the question, why are they making that much money? And that's a question that the top tour pros have asked themselves many times over the years. It really started back in the 1960s. I believe it was 1968. Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer launched a coup against the existing structure of professional golf. At that time, pro golf was still dominated by club professionals, the PGA of America. Your average golf professional who works like at a golf shop, he was in charge. He really had a lot of power over these top tour professionals. And when professional golf events started to get put on TV and there was more money and sponsors and revenue generated, these top pros like Jack and Arnold, they realized, hey, we've got a lot of leverage here, and we're not really exercising it. So Arnold's top guy, Mark McCormick, he was really the brains of the operation, and he was able to splinter off these top tour pros from the PGA of America, and that's when the PGA Tour was really started. There was this bifurcation between tour professionals, touring pros, the PGA Tour, and the PGA of America, the club professionals. And so that bifurcation really continues to this day. So, things went on. Things were generally okay. The tour grew, revenue grew. There were some decent leaders there. And then in the early 1990s, the number one golfer in the world, Greg Norman, kind of had another one of these moments. He's an Australian. He thought that, his contributions to professional golf were not being properly valued. He thought there was more of an opportunity for a world golf tour, and the tour was able to head off that threat. And one of the ways in which they did that was starting the World Golf Championships, the WGCs. They created these no-cut, guaranteed purse, guaranteed money for appearances, tour events. And that's how the WGCs came into being. Because if you really think about it, it's kind of pro golf is kind of strange. You have these top tour pros like Tiger when he was healthy, Rory, Phil Mickelson, John Rahm, Brooks Koepka, whoever. These guys, they show up to a tour event and, they're the draw. These top guys, they're the reason why people are tuning in on TV. The reason why fans show up to the event. They spend money on concessions. It's why corporate sponsors want to get involved in the event, because Tiger or whoever's going to show up. But then if Tiger or these guys, if they have a couple of bad days on the golf course, they miss the cut and walk away with $0, even though they brought all this revenue to this event. So in a true free market environment, these top players would be able to generate appearance fees, just for showing up. But the PGA Tour, through its 501c6 nonprofit structure, they were able to prevent these top players from getting appearance fees, and that was kind of a long time source of tension between some of the top pros and kind of the everyman tour pros, the journeymen, if you will, the mules. So anyway, the tour was able to head off the Greg Norman threat, and then everything really changed when Tiger Woods came into being. So, really there's professional golf before Tiger, and there's professional golf with Tiger, and now we're moving into professional golf after Tiger. Okay, and so with Tiger Woods, professional golf became must-watch TV. I mean, I'm in this category as well. I mean, when Tiger Woods was playing in a tour event, whether it was a major or not, I was watching on TV because I love to watch Tiger Woods. That was not the case before Tiger Woods. And then now that Tiger Woods is no longer really a factor due to age and injuries, the tour has built up this massive infrastructure, these massive purses, these massive schedules, and all these, they're paying all these guys millions of dollars, or they have the ability to go out there and earn millions. They have the most generous pension plan, retirement plan in all of professional sports. And now Tiger Woods isn't around anymore. And so now the professional golf fan is kind of reverting back to the way things were before 1997. And they're really only watching the majors. And that's, I'm kind of in that category too. I mean, I consider myself kind of a casual golf observer. I love playing golf, but I'm not going to watch golf on TV unless it's a major championship. And most golf fans are just like that. I mean, the people who watch these average tour events on TV every week are mostly very old. The tour is no longer capturing that younger demographic now that Tiger's out of the game, or basically out of the game. And so the tour has really had to adjust, and the leverage, really has tipped in the favor of these top tour pros, the guys who are generating all the money. And Phil Mickelson has been someone who he kind of picked up the torch from Greg Norman, of the guy who was quietly kind of behind the scenes maneuvering, trying to get more money into the pockets of the guys who were actually generating that revenue. There's nothing wrong with that morally. But Phil has always felt like the top tour pros were being taken advantage of. They weren't generating enough money for themselves. The PGA Tour was becoming this bloated organization. I mean, the commissioner, Jay Monahan, is making $14 million a year, flying on private jets. You've got hundreds of employees. And Phil's just looking around like, I'm generating all this money and it's going into this machine, this bureaucratic, morass, this swamp that I really don't have any control over and doesn't necessarily represent my interests as a top player on tour. So that was some of the controversy, and that brings us to LIV Golf. So what is LIV Golf? So LIV Golf was started 2 years ago. The CEO is Greg Norman. And really all you have to know about LIV Golf is that it's bankrolled by the government of Saudi Arabia through their Public Investment Fund, or PIF. The PIF has over $600 billion assets under management. They have plans to grow it to, over $1 trillion by 2025 through some sale of the shares of Saudi Aramco, their state oil company. So, basically they have unlimited resources when it comes to professional sports. And the PIF, they've been making investments into certain Western companies like Uber and Boeing. They've invested into sports, into the English Premier League soccer, into Formula One racing, and now into professional golf through LIV Golf. And the reason, the PIF, the Saudis, are not necessarily after a rate of return on their investment. Really what they're after is access and legitimacy. The Saudis are looking to diversify their empire away from oil and gas and protect themselves by creating allies, not just among heads of state and governments, but among high-profile blue-chip American and Western corporations. And there's really no better way to do that than by investing in sports. That's how you get a seat at the table. That's how you get access. Everyone loves to be involved in sports, whether as a fan or as a corporate sponsor. And that's really what the Saudis through the PIF are after through LIV Golf. And so they started this new professional golf league, and they were very successful. They poached a lot of the top players: Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Cameron Smith. A lot of these top guys, a lot of major champions: Bubba Watson, Patrick Reed, Sergio Garcia. They got a lot of these top players, to come with them, and Bryson DeChambeau, and they did so by offering them, huge sums of money to leave the PGA Tour and come play for LIV. And the PGA Tour, the way they responded to this threat initially was pretty disgraceful. They kind of took a page out of the left-wing media playbook, and they tried that. Their first tactic was, to virtue signal and try to leverage the genuine grief from the 9/11 families. Families of people who died in the 9/11 attacks in the World Trade Center, or on the airplanes, or in the Pentagon, or wherever. And they tried to say that somehow if you're supporting this LIV Golf endeavor, then you are pro hijacker. You're pro 9/11, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's shameful. It's one of the most embarrassing and pathetic things I've ever seen anyone do. But that's what Jay Monahan, the CEO of the PGA Tour, and all these the PGA Tour adjacent media personalities, that's what they were doing. They were wrapping themselves in the flag and saying that, hey, if you support LIV, or if you support competition in golf, if you support something new in the world of professional golf, then you're some kind of an anti-American, pro-Saudi terrorist. That's what they were saying. So anyway, LIV had their first season, kind of a half season in 2022, and then they were off to the races in 2023. They got a TV deal with the CW. They weren't generating a ton of eyeballs, but again, that wasn't really the intent of the Saudi PIF. Really, they just wanted to get a seat at the table. They wanted to wedge their way into professional golf and see what happened. And what happened was, really everything kind of came to a head a couple of weeks ago. And on June 6th, on CNBC, there was an announcement. Jay Monahan sat there with Yasser Al-Rumayyan, the chairman of the PIF, and they announced that there is essentially a merger. Now, a merger is not exactly the textbook definition of what's happening here. Really, what's happening is the PGA Tour and LIV, the PIF, are creating a new joint venture. Right now it's just called NewCo. The details are still being worked out. But essentially, they're creating this new vehicle. The PGA Tour is going to no longer be a 501c6 nonprofit. There's going to be a new for-profit entity, and the PIF is going to be the sole investor with the first right of refusal for any additional investors in this new entity, this new commercial for-profit entity. So really, it's still kind of unclear what's gonna happen from here in terms of what professional golf is going to look like. Really, the only guarantee is that it's going to look a little bit different. I mean, I think these two tours are going to work together. I think the LIV golfers, for the most part, are going to have the opportunity to play on the PGA Tour, and PGA Tour golfers are going to have the opportunity to play on LIV. I mean, really, there's just a lot of egg on the face of the PGA Tour players and the commissioner and their their bureaucrats and the media, especially those who were saying that any kind of engagement with the Saudis was a pro 9/11, a pro terrorist position, and here they are, embarking on this new business venture, saying, "Well, just kidding. Actually, we just said what we had to say. We were virtue signaling." I mean, really, you're a sucker if you believed any of that in the first place. I mean, that's just how business is done nowadays in America. You virtue signal to the hilt, and when you get called a hypocrite, you just kind of shrug your shoulders and move on. That's how politics works. That's how business works. I didn't make up the rules, but that's just the way business is being done nowadays. But anyway, that's really what it looks like, to come. I mean, really. This, from the PGA Tour's perspective, from a purely business perspective, it's not really the worst idea because, as I said, now that Tiger Woods is no longer involved in the PGA Tour, they've suffered a catastrophic ratings collapse. I've got family who's involved in the Byron Nelson tournament down in Dallas, and AT&T just dropped them as a sponsor. There's really just when Tiger Woods is no longer really involved in the PGA Tour, no one's watching, and they renegotiated all these broadcast deals. With the assumption that the ratings would stay high because Tiger Woods, especially after winning the Masters 4 years ago, everyone thought that Tiger, had probably 10 more years of play left in him. Obviously, that all went away after the car accident in Los Angeles. So really, the PGA Tour they were bleeding money. They had spent $50 million in legal fees. They were losing sponsors left and right. They were having to jack up their purses to try to prevent golfers from defecting to LIV. And so really their business model had become unsustainable. So this new joint venture with the Saudis, who have unlimited money, this really solves their pressing money concerns, their cash flow problems. It takes their main existential competitor off the board, at least for now. And it's a win for LIV as well, and for the Saudis. They get a seat at the table. They now have the legitimacy and the access they were hoping for in professional golf. And we'll see how it plays out. I mean, Jay Monahan is slated to be the CEO of this new entity. We'll see how that works out. There was just this big story saying that he just had some kind of a health emergency, so we'll see if he's okay. The two kind of dynamos of the PGA Tour board, Ed Hurley, who's a prominent M&A attorney, and Jimmy Dunn. Those guys are going to be board members of this new entity. Yasser Al-Rumayyan is going to be he's going to be the chairman of this new board of the new entity. So we'll see. I mean, right now it looks like the tour might have the upper hand in terms of leadership, but we'll see how things go over time. Obviously, as this past year has shown, that things can change rather rapidly, especially when you have really an irrational actor, so to speak, that is not really responding to market forces. That is the Saudi PIF. Again, they're not really necessarily after a rate of return. They're not just lighting money on fire, but their goals are not necessarily, making money immediately off this new professional golf entity. So that's really the lay of the land, and it's really exciting. It's really interesting. As a former professional athlete, someone who follows the business of sports very closely, these things are fun to watch. They're fun to observe. It's exciting for me to see how these things develop. I mean, and really the lesson here is that you can only suppress market forces for so long. Guys like Phil Mickelson, he was absolutely right in a lot of ways. He saw an opportunity. Greg Norman was right before him. Jack and Arnold Palmer were right before those guys. There's this long-standing tension between the players who generate the eyeballs, who generate the revenue, who are really the forces behind, the dollars and cents of professional golf, and these other guys, the 150 other tour pros who make in the low seven figures a year, but outside of their family and friends, no one knows who the hell they are. So that kind of a situation was never sustainable. It was never going to last forever. And I think it's a good thing that eventually professional golf is going to get to a place where the real top name players are experimenting with new formats. They're doing things that can hopefully generate interest outside of the four major championships. I mean, I've always kind of looked at golf kind of like tennis. I mean, really, no one cares outside of the four majors. But hey, I'm all for experimentation. I'm all for these guys trying to find value where there previously wasn't any. And really, it's also been exciting just to see, a lot of these left-wing virtue signalers in the media and the golf establishment just kind of have their noses rubbed in this. It really, when I first made some positive comments about LIV on Twitter about a year ago, just the bots, everyone just their propaganda. I mean, everyone is just so propagandized, like I had so many people who, are you pro Saudi? I mean, they regurgitate talking points they're exposed to on ESPN, SportsCenter, or Golf Channel or whatever. And, just you can instantly see who's able to think for himself and who's not. Now, I'm not a LIV fanboy either. I mean, I appreciate the innovation. I appreciate the team concept. I like to see people trying new things. And what I really respect are the top players who have the guts, people like Phil, to stand up and say, hey, there's a problem here. We're not receiving all of our market potential. Everyone is achieving their market value in the system except for us. There's this bloated PGA Tour organization with people like Jay Monahan making $14 million a year, flying private everywhere. And, what is he doing for me, for the player who's generating a lot of the revenue, a lot of the eyeballs, a lot of the attention? It's a really interesting case study in the business of sports, PR, media management, media manipulation, if you will. And just so from someone with my background, my interest, I've been following this very closely. And, really, I guess the last thing that I'll touch on here kind of going forward is, it's still somewhat unclear, the regulatory hurdles that this new enterprise has to clear. I'm skeptical this thing is going to get stonewalled, by the DOJ or the FTC, or by the player advisory board on the PGA Tour. I mean, first of all, like I said, Ed Hurley, he and Jimmy Dunn. I mean, Hurley, he's one of the top M&A attorneys in the country. He's at Wachtel. I mean, this guy wouldn't have put something together that was going to get rejected by the FTC or the DOJ. The PGA Tour, it stands to mention, was under a Department of Justice investigation for anti-competitive practices. Again, I mean, the PGA Tour operated under this weird 501c6 nonprofit structure, but they were also trying to ban some of their members from competing on LIV. I mean, that's not really the actions of a charity. So, this DOJ investigation should go away with this new business entity being formed, but we'll see. I mean, there were some whispers on Capitol Hill about anti-competitive practices, and then now these two entities are consolidating into one essentially. So I'm not really sure how that solves the anti-competition problems. But the tour has had lawmakers on Capitol Hill quash their legal problems in the past. And that was the stuff brought on by the Greg Norman World Golf Tour kerfuffle in the early 90s. But that was when lawmakers on Capitol Hill were, they looked at the tour more favorably. And I'm not so confident they're going to look upon, a new investment from the Saudi government as something they want to rubber stamp. So we'll see. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of things still to be determined. But overall, again, I'm really excited by this. I think it's very interesting. It's something that's piqued my interest as a former athlete and someone who tried, at least in a small way, to talk amongst other current athletes in the NFL locker room about the business side of our game. So it's fun to see players like Mickelson and others get involved in the business side and shake things up in Norman. And I'm very excited to see where this thing goes. So we'll be following this story closely. As you could probably tell, this stuff really interests me. And if there are more updates down the road, I'm certainly going to comment on it. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.